region. The urban growth strategy, you can see that in the map there. That's a key component of our regional planning. And then acting as a regional forum, and it's we host a lot of conversations, engagements with our city managers, our city engineers, you know, in addition, obviously, to the work we do with our elected officials around the region. So the purpose of the presentation is to provide you with an update on the status of the treatment plant as we are now advancing construction. And when complete, you can see we will be replacing the Lions Gate wastewater treatment plant, one of our 5 plants that we have. We have 3 on the river, Iona plant, which is still primary, and of course our Lions Gate plant. So why are we building the plant? And in 2012, federal regulations came into effect that identified 66 plants across the country that were still at a primary level. The Victoria's plant, well, the Victoria didn't have a plant, so they obviously went on the list. And there was 3 lists that were put together. And both the North Shore plant and the Iona plant were put on the list. First list was for a 2020 completion date. Iona made the 2030 list, and Halifax and Montreal and a number of others are on the 2040 list. The obviously the purpose, the reason that the feds introduced those regulations was to protect sensitive marine habitats, the Burrard Inlet, Salish Sea. All of these plants are either on the west coast or the east coast. We'll replace the aging Lions Gate plant. That is our oldest, our very first plant. Iona was built in '63, but the first plant in our fleet is in 1961. I've got a lot of time spent there, and if you go into some of the galleries there, you can see some of the original components. Some of the operators there, they tell me these are engines that were put into submarines that were in the Korean War. I think they're joking, but I'm not sure. The other main piece is to return land to the province and the Squamish Nation. So the land that the plant is built on is Squamish Nation land, and that's another reason we have to move. So here's an overview of the program. So you see, if you focus in on the Lions Gate Bridge, that's where the existing plant is. We had to do a series of conveyance works. So that was a pump station underneath the bridge, and then a set of conveyance pipes to pump all of West Van's sewage 2.1 kilometers east to the new plant, which is located at West First and Phillip. And I guess I should say that all of the conveyance work that was completed, that's been finished for a few years. That was done on time, on budget. And obviously the plant is under construction. There'll be a little bit of work at the end when the plant's connected to tie the conveyance system all together. But we've had, my operating teams had possession of the pump station for a number of years, and it's being cycled and maintained. So we're building the plant for a growing population. It's designed to serve well over 300,000 residents, obviously for the 3 municipalities, Squamish Nation, Tsleil-Waututh Nation. And we are expecting that plant to provide good service out to year 2100. So some of the highlights from the facility, we added tertiary filtration. That's a step at the end to polish the effluent. We have built it in a way that we can accommodate growth, as I mentioned. There's some resource recovery, sustainability features in modern design, and really quite high sophisticated odor control. It is just next to the Norgate community in the district of North Van. So managing odor was very important for that neighborhood. It was part of a long process. The time when we were in the preliminary design phase, I was working with the city of North Vancouver. So I was on the municipal side saying, here's some of the things we need to keep in mind. And community amenities is one of it. You know, there's a roof, there's a green roof, there's some community space in there, and that was integral to fitting into the community. The site, Let's see here. The site is located. There's a good shot of it if you've been in and around that Pemberton area. And like I said, you can see Norgate, just really one strip of commercial property away from a dense neighborhood, and then you have the port activities right in front. So this is, let's see, I haven't given these notes again, but if I'm following the narrative here, what we had to do in the event that you've got enough space where you can lay your plant out in a campus style. This is Anasis, large, come on over, Jerry. And where we're very constrained on the North Shore, and finding a site large enough to do a large campus was nearly impossible. So we end up with a stacked design, and that allows us that efficient use of space. And that's why you can see the plant is now, we've come out of the ground with it if you've been past. And as the concrete comes up, you'll see we're going to rise up to around 5 stories tall. And we'll have tanks on top of tanks on different floors. And the system just works through.
Peter, maybe I just make a brief introduction now that Jerry's arrived, and you carry on, but Jerry, it's great to see you. Thank you for coming to West Vancouver. For those of you on council or the community who haven't met Jerry, you might know him best for his time as a very famous football player. But if you didn't know him for that, I think that was in the 80s, linebacker.
Yeah, lineman, offensive
lineman. There you go.
Yeah.
But Jerry has almost as much time in the municipal world as I do, about 30 years. Starting out, I think he was a councillor in the city of New Westminster for 6 years. In the
9 years.
9 years, and then was the head of engineering for the city of Vancouver, and then Metro picked him up in 2019. And has been guiding the ship admirably since then.
Thank you. Yes, you have my whole biography, and I apologize for being late. I was stuck in traffic on the bridge. I'm sure you've never heard that before. And,
anyway, we're very grateful for your. And now you can go because he's doing a great job.
You're in good hands. Yes.
Good.
Peter and Jody.
I think this was our transition slide, isn't it?
So I'll go through a bit of the program history here. So how did we get to where we are? So just a really quick high level timeline here. We started working on this project in 2011 with the project definition phase. And over the next number of years to 2017, did a lot of planning and procurement, which culminated in the contract award to Acciona in 2017, the design build finance contract. From 2017 to 2022, Acciona was on site doing the builds until the termination in early 2022. At that point, we went for procurement and entered into agreement with PCL to take over the site and work with us in a transition to complete the project. At the same time, AECOM transitioned from our owner's engineer to our engineer of record and took on the design component of the program. We entered into a construction contract with PCL in late 2024 to complete the contract and are now in full construction with them and AECOM as we move forward to 2030 to complete the plant. So in terms of the activities since 2022 in the transition, some of the things we undertook, we did a due diligence review of the previous design and construction from Acciona. AECOM took over the design, so they picked up the design where it was and commenced taking it forward to completion. We transferred the construction and site responsibility over to PCL, so they took control of the site and started undertaking concrete repairs and other early works to advance construction while we were negotiating a new contract. A big component of the work that happened over the transition period was concrete repairs. PCL has completed over 1,500 concrete repairs. That work is now completed, and now that we're into regular construction, we're monitoring the current work and addressing any additional repairs as they come up. We're often asked why we didn't know about the level of deficiencies within the project, and that really comes down to the model, the contract model we were in. It was a design build finance. So in that model, Acciona was responsible for design and construction. That was their responsibility, and they had the overall responsibility for quality of design. we had oversight, but not as much in-depth involvement in the day-to-day. We were aware of the deficiencies and the concrete repairs that were required, which was a component of why we made the difficult but necessary decision to terminate the contract. The extent of the issues with the contractor's work weren't actually apparent until we took over. And that was when we discovered the work wasn't nearly as complete as we had been told. So that transition period was really focused on identifying and repairing those concrete issues and design issues that we had identified. So now looking at, oh, now I'm not advancing. Maybe I've done something wrong. There we go. So moving forward and looking, that's the look back, looking forward, we are into new construction. As I mentioned, we signed the contract with PCL in October of 2024 and are ramping up in construction, and it is getting quite busy out there. Since we signed the contract, we've poured over 3,600 cubic meters of concrete. We have almost 300 tradespeople at site, and they are increasing every week. All 5 tower cranes are in operation. And you can see in this photo, the digester roofs was a big milestone. We completed both of those. And PCL continues to ramp up activities on site. Another big component of the work that's happening right now is structural steel installation. So this is the operations and maintenance building. We started receiving and erecting structural steel in late January. And it's really changing the face of the site. If you go past, it looks quite a bit different with the steel being installed. We're over 100,000 kilograms of steel has been installed, and more is being delivered every week. So it's quite an exciting, it's really exciting to see everything coming together. In terms of operations planning and programming, so we've got some views of the building information model here, and it's the 3D rendering of the plant that our operations teams within Peter's group can use to look at the operability and maintainability of the plant when it's done. So on the left-hand side, this is an exterior view looking at the digesters and the odor control system, and that's really looking at accessibility and space around the facility for operations. In the top right, this is the influent pump station and the interior view so that our ops folks can take a look at operability of the influent screening system. And the bottom picture on the left is one of our solids buildings, and this is really looking at accessibility to the valves, so they actually can get in there in a 3D way and start working on what it'll look like to actually operate the plant. In terms of construction highlights, when we're done, these are some of the key metrics. We will have placed over 80,000 cubic meters of concrete. We will have put in over 40,000 meters of piping and 800 kilometers of electrical cabling. We'll have over 900 pieces of wastewater treatment equipment and over 6,000 instrument and control devices. So really draws attention to the complexity of the work. It is a lot of work. I'm really excited to see it moving forward. So in terms of the contract and program budget, you will have seen we announced the contract value and we signed, and that contract is $1.95 billion. It is within the approved budget of $3.86 billion. The delta between the 195 to the 386 is really the rest of the program costs. Those are owner costs. Those are the spend to date on the program, equipment purchase, engineering, risk reserve, contingency. So all of the other things that make up the program budget. The schedule for completion, as I mentioned, is 2030. And the model that we entered into with PCL is a target cost contract model, which I'll talk to in the next slides here. So a target cost contract is not a fixed price contract, but it is a model that has become preferred for larger, more complex contracts, typically over the $500 million range. Fixed price contracts generally aren't an affordable or available option for a project of this size and complexity. And some of the benefits that we get out of a target price contract is really that open book principle and extensive rights to audit. So a lot more financial control over the contract. It's a really collaborative model. So we work really closely with AECOM and with PCL in looking at problem solving and making joint decisions that's best for the project. It also provides us with financial management plans with clear protocols, really good reporting. It does add a lot more risk on the owner side than a fixed price contract, but that comes with greater oversight and greater participation and influence over decisions. So just the roles and responsibilities for the three parties that are part of the program. So really starting with the owner, that's Metro Vancouver. We have the overall management of the project and are the key decision maker. We have the budget oversight as well as engagement with key stakeholders. PCL is the construction contractor. Their key role is that site management and construction productivity oversight. They are responsible for quality control, and they have the construction cost control component. And then the engineer of record is AECOM. Their responsibility is really around that technical and design oversight. They're responsible for technical reviews and approvals. They're key in the field support and inspection side of things, as well as doing the quality assurance for construction conformance. And I think that's my last slide, so I'm handing it back to Peter to close this out, or Jerry.
Maybe I'll wrap up. So thank you very much, Jody. And I guess I'd like to finish with maybe what I think is the most important issue, because I know it's been a very, very difficult, disappointing, twisting path we've been on. And but what I want to assure everybody is at the end of the day, we're going to have a very high quality treatment plant that we can be proud of, that will serve the North Shore residents well into the next 100 years plus. So we wouldn't be here before you today if we thought at the end of all of this, we were going to have something that was substandard, wasn't going to do the job, wasn't going to last. So we recognize that it's been very difficult for the North Shore, but at the end of the day, a new plant that provides high quality treatment to protect the environment, that has our highest level of odor control, so that it can be a good neighbor with residents that are only a couple blocks away. Even though it's an industrial area, there's still houses just a couple blocks away. A resilient facility that will withstand and last through a post-seismic event, and achieve our goals, as I said, of protecting the environment. So happy to take any questions, and appreciate the time to speak with your council and your residents, and happy to come at your request.
Well, we really appreciate it, Jerry. Thank you. I think just before we turn over to questions, I think it would be worthwhile, because the board directed you and your staff to work really hard on this year's budget and the capital budget. And at our last meeting on Friday last week, the board passed the budget, and I think it would be nice if you just highlighted that for the public.
Sure, yeah, and so we've we've had a lot of budget discussions over the past year. You know, part of that difficulty was looking at the wastewater treatment plant, the reassessment of the budget, and cost allocation. We set the budget, and then the board gave us direction in November to say, look, you need to look deeper at savings, either that we understand all. It's no different than the challenges you're facing here at your council table. We understand the need. The need is very, very long, and there's a limit to what the residents can afford, and so find a way to make it more affordable for the residents, in our case, of the entire region. So yesterday, the board, in our board budget workshop. It was just yesterday, right? Yeah.
Time goes really quick in this job.
I added a bit of time to get there, but yes, not last Friday, yesterday. The board gave us direction to, and they accepted a number of reductions that we proposed, about $360 million in operating savings, $1.1 billion in capital reductions over the 5-year plan. And so our proposed target increase for next year, 2026, was 5%, and that's been reduced in half to 2.5%. So our 5-year plan is a 2.5% increase, 3% increase, and then we still have it at 5.55, but we'll continue to do work on that. So yeah, about $1.4 billion in savings and reductions, and reducing next year's target. So what we do now is staff will go with that direction, go and spend the next 6 months preparing and working through the budget, and then our budget will come to the board in October. But those are our marching orders to come back at no more than 2.5%.
Thank you. And Jerry, I just again want to thank you for that, because it was a big undertaking that the board put to you, and I think you've done a great job at responding. So I'd like to turn it over first to see if members of council have questions. And we have some of the members of the public, some who have been very involved and active, that may wish to pose some questions. Linda, Councillor Watt.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Much appreciated. So it was mentioned that Acciona had overall responsibility for design, construction, and Metro had some oversight. And I'm just curious, is it standard on other large infrastructure projects, either locally or across Canada, that all of that, or the vast majority of the responsibility would be put on the contractor with, I won't say, I don't know if the word minimal is correct, but well, let's just call it what it is, minimal oversight as it went along, or you can correct me if I'm incorrect on that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
No, I appreciate it. It's an important question. It's a great question. So there's a whole range of different delivery models that are available in industry, and it goes from you know, at one end you have very involved owner that has a whole series. If you think even like about building a house, it's not really much difference. If you have a very involved owner that could be involved in a whole bunch of separate contracts that looks after each component of it and then puts it all together as the owner. At the other end of the spectrum, you could have a very distant owner that hires somebody to look after all of the details, and you simply just walk in when it's finished. And so in this delivery model, we were not all the way to that extreme, but closer to that extreme in terms of a partnership where the firm that was hired was responsible for designing, building, and financing the project. And part of that at the time was political view. You know, in order for us to get senior government funding, we needed to explore and look at those public-private partnership models. And part of it was the construction environment, the market at that time. As Jody said, the market today is very, very different. So at that time, we had a guaranteed price, a guaranteed delivery date, and somebody we hired that would do the design, the build, and finance the project. And obviously that didn't happen. There were problems along the way, and that resulted in what is always the last resort to actually terminate a contract, because we know how difficult that was.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm still trying to understand though is that, or was that at the time, the standard way of doing things locally or across the country?
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know, that's what happened here.
Yeah, there was a big push in industry to do more 3P projects. There was certainly interest at the federal government. They made it a requirement to look at and explore and encourage public-private partnership. And that was what I wasn't. None of the executives were there at the time, but that was a part of the consideration. And I should just say, many of those projects, like there's not a problem with any one of the different models. They can all work very well. On the North Shore, you saw we had a pump station and a pipeline built to connect to the new, and that finished on time, under budget, and worked really, really well. So these projects could go very well. This one didn't.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Gambier.
Thanks. Okay, I got 4 questions and they're not in any particular order. I can't really figure out how to make them jive very well, but, okay, so just, I've been reading, you know, over the years and more recently that, Acciona is still being considered for some projects with Metro. Is that true?
We haven't had them in any of our procurement processes that I'm aware of, no. They are in litigation with us for $250 million, and we're countersuing them for $500 million. So
Yeah.
not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, all right, well, that sounds like a good
And
answer.
what might be, the confusion might be they are involved in partnerships on many projects in the province. They just go in a partnership on Site C, in a partnership on the Patella Bridge, in a
Oh,
partnership
okay.
on the Broadway corridor. None of those are with Metro Vancouver,
Metro Vancouver.
but they're involved within a partnership arrangement in other infrastructure projects.
Oh, I see.
And I think it's worth noting that in the North Shore wastewater treatment plant, they were not in a partnership. with
They were
a
not in
local-
partnership,
They
they
were
were on
not
their
in a
own.
partnership with a local company. They were
Yes.
doing it on their own,
Yes.
Right, okay. All right,
but they're a Spanish company with Spanish engineers. And,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, in terms of, you know, is there a policy at Metro for awarding contracts? My recollection, I was on the utilities committee, more than 10 years ago, and then the water committee. My impression was that, you know, because we're government entities, you know, it's hard to justify not accepting the lowest bid because we're using public money. Is there actually a policy at Metro on that? I can't really recall, and I'm just trying to, you know, understand, you know, in hindsight, they were probably the lowest bid. I don't know that was probably not public information, but anyway, I just wonder
Sure.
about that
Yeah,
question.
no, thank you. Yeah, no, we certainly have a procurement policy. And within that, and it's extensive, within that policy, it's not specifically low bid. It's essentially best value. So if a firm is low bid and meets all the technical requirements, that's easy.
Mhm.
If a firm is the lowest bid but doesn't meet requirements or isn't the strongest technical submission, then it gets into a more rigorous review where we're looking at, well, what is the best value?
Mhm.
Often we will award to the lowest bid. Sometimes we will award to the number 2 bid because we say, well, they're a little bit cheaper. They're much stronger in this area, this area, this area, this area. And so we may award on a best value approach. So we're not bound only to the pricing, but the pricing is a major component of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense, for sure. And so, in terms of what happened here, like, I don't really recall, I haven't been involved for, you know, my whole life, but, you know, this is sort of the biggest, I'm gonna call it a boondoggle, with Metro.
Disappointment. Could we say disappointment?
Disappointment. I don't even know how to spell boondoggle. So anyways, but you know, since the real problem, I'm going to suggest, occurred at the Metro level, like at the higher up Metro level. You know, I guess the question for North Shore residents and governments is why, if it wasn't our fault on the North Shore, if it was kind of like the administration of the organization's fault, why are we paying for it? why are we paying for 70% of the problem when it wasn't us who made the mistake? So how do we sort of explain that?
Great. No, excellent question. I'll divide it into two pieces. Is whose fault was it?
Hmm.
And then separately, why is the North Shore paying for it? The first piece, I want to emphatically disagree with you that Metro's position is very clear, and the fault is with the
With Acciona.
Yeah, with Acciona. We have a $500 million lawsuit litigation that will take years, and our case is very, very clear. They were hired to design, build, deliver this project, fixed price, guaranteed delivery date. And those design build, like there were some earlier questions about the model, the design build, recognize when somebody is designing it and building it, that's their baby. We were inspecting. We even had an independent certifier. So we would, we had our owner's engineer that would be monitoring as well. When a progress payment was due, we went to an independent party to determine whether it was done properly and it was completed and should it be paid. You may have seen in the media a while back an accusation that we weren't paying our bills, that we owed Acciona money. We didn't make the last payment because the independent certifier said that work wasn't completed. It wasn't completed to their satisfaction. That's why we didn't make the last payment. So it's very, very clear from Metro's position who was at fault. And then the second part of your question, which is really a difficult question for the North Shore, is why is the North Shore paying the penalty? And so, and as the mayor knows, the directors spent 3 long meetings hashing through the cost allocation. So the first step that the board did was approved the revised budget, and that was to provide the funding. So we had the funding to complete the project. The second question that we brought to the board was, how do we divide up that amount? And the board had 3 long, spirited, frustrating, difficult meetings, included tears around the table. I won't say who was crying, but anyways, there were tears around the table and it was very difficult. And we have a cost allocation model that the board created in the 90s. And that shares some of the costs, but not all of the costs. And so as Peter showed you and I'm giving you a long answer, but this is, I think, a very important issue for you on the North Shore, because these are big dollars. So you saw we have the 4 different sewage areas, and we have the different categories of costs. And for a lot of this, it falls into tier 2, which is a 70-30 split. So 30% of the costs are paid for by the North Shore only, and 70% of the costs are paid for by everybody equally, including the North Shore. And so a large portion of the project is being paid by the entire region, but not all of the project. And because the population on the North Shore is so small, even though it's only that 30% piece, your population is only 8% of the region. So you've got 8% paying 30% of some of those costs. So the board was presented with that, and using just the regular allocation, the rates would have been $725 per household increase to cover that $2.8 billion jump. The allocation would have been $725 per house on the North Shore. It would have been $140 per house in the Vancouver Surge area. It would have been $70 a house in the Lulu Island, And then the Fraser sewage area is the biggest area. It's about half, almost half of the region. And it would have been $80 per house for the Fraser sewage area. So the discussion, the debate we had, well, how is that fair if the North Shore is having to pay that much, if 8% of the population is paying, you know, a big portion of that increase. And so after all of that debate, what we identified was that for every $10 more that the houses across the region took beyond their regular, so for $10 more for everybody else, then the North Shore rate could come down $135. So again, it's a big, because you're such a small part of the population. And so after many, many rounds, it was agreed by the board for everybody to pay $10 more and the North Shore to pay $135 less. Now, that's not as much as obviously the North Shore would prefer. So what that meant was, at the end of the day, the North Shore will go up $590 and the others are going $10 more than what I said. The other thing that was identified was, because it's $590, could you spread it out over a longer period of time? So the rest of the region took it in one jump. And so that was last year. They took that full increment in one year. And so, so that piece is done and reduces our borrowing. The North Shore part is spread out over five increments. So each of the increments for the North Shore are, what was it, $118. So it'll be $10 a month more each year for 5 years. So ultimately it's $50 a month more for the North Shore. And the rest of the region took that big jump in one go, but it was less money for them. It's a very long answer, but I know it's a difficult question that I wanted to make sure everybody understood.
Thanks, Jerry. I think that was an excellent answer. And I can just add a bit from the political side. Those of us who represent our communities on the board asked our colleagues to contribute $40. And it was an enormous amount of debate. $40 would have evened it out across the entire region. And we were unsuccessful at $40. We felt we were very close. We tried $30. We got a little closer. We tried $20. And then ironically, some of the people who thought it was unfair, particularly Vancouver, voted against the $20.
It was too little.
It was too little. They wanted it to be more. I think, quite honestly, if we could have re-voted that, we might have succeeded in getting the $20. And then it finally settled at $10, with still some of our friends and colleagues south of the Fraser voting even against that small increase. Ultimately, this system needs to be corrected. We have a very successful single water utility. And I'm of the view that at some point in the future, we must have a single sewage utility. I take the view that we're all in this together. It really doesn't matter where you live. There's just as many people who drive in from out in the Fraser Valley to work on the North Shore or recreate here, who use the facilities. And I teased our colleagues by suggesting we were going to impose a toilet tax on them, but anyway.
Okay, my last question is related to an asset management plan. So, you know, we're doing this, you know, for us with this project. Does Metro have an asset management plan for wastewater and water?
Yeah, yes, we have many asset management plans. We have them for each of the different types of assets. So the reason I mention that is because a sewage or a water asset management plan is very different than our housing asset management plan, where you're looking at 50-year buildings versus 100-year buried linear infrastructure, versus parks asset management plan, where we actually look at natural assets as well in those parks. So each of the areas has asset management plans, and all of those come together through our budget process. And again, on very different time horizons, even within the liquid waste plan, linear infrastructure versus a pump station versus a
Mhm.
treatment plant all have different life cycles and different maintenance.
Okay, but there is a facilities plan for
absolutely.
that, yeah.
And they drive our capital plans.
Mhm.
Chair, I might add too, we've got systems, well, we've got a robust operations and maintenance department. We have preventative maintenance schedules on all of our pumps and, you know, everything that needs to be moved through. So we do everything we can on our current assets to keep them in a state of good repair. We inventory them, we take assessments of them, and we published a scorecard a couple of years on the state of the assets for water and sewer.
Yeah, maybe one last thing I'll just say is that that our assets are a little bit, many of our assets are quite different than municipal government assets. And so sometimes that generates some conversations. So if we've got we're just completing a 21-foot diameter water tunnel next to the Ironworkers Bridge, Second Narrows Bridge. So a 21-foot diameter tunnel under Burrard Inlet that has 3 big water mains inside is a very different type of asset than a 6-inch main in a street. And so sometimes you will see in a municipal asset management plan, when you see the scorecard to start, you might see some more red, and you might see nearing end of its life and starting to flag that it should go. Whereas if you look at our scorecard, you'll see mostly green and won't see even very many yellow, and you shouldn't see any red, because we can't ever have a failure in an underwater crossing that would then mean there's no water supply to 10 municipalities. Whereas in a municipality, nobody wants to have a failure, but you could have a failure on a block, on a street. So there are different types of assets with different risk profiles. So you'll sometimes see a difference between what you might be presented with from your staff and what you might see as a director at Metro.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. And I should just add, as everyone knows, Councillor Cassidy is our representative on the liquid waste, and I know she loves it.
Yes, I do. And every time we have a council meeting, I do tell them about no milk down the drain, no butter, no yogurt. This entire community knows about it, and they know about washing in cold water because of the microfibers.
And the amount of soap to use.
And the type of soap half, they all know it. Trust me, trust me, trust me. I don't put them to a quiz, but I soon will. Anyway, so some of these questions I've already asked, but for the public, one of the things that the average individual who isn't at all aware of this issue, which, believe it or not, most people's heads are deeply buried in the sand, and that's where they wish to keep them. But most people find it incomprehensible that you could go from 700 million in 2014 to quadruple that, in more than quadruple, by 2024. And I don't wish to belabor the point, but I mean, how bad could Acciona have been? I mean, it was $146 million acceptance, lower than the nearest bid. But how bad could they have been to go from 700 million to virtually 3 billion?
Yeah, that's what I can say is that, well, a couple things happened. So it is, there was quite a different market condition when we went back out and reset the budget. So it was we talked a little bit about how, we can't, the market won't support a fixed price contract for a big, huge piece of infrastructure now. There's too many variables. You watch the news with tariffs and ever since COVID, we've had unbelievable market instability. So it is a very different market now than it was when Acciona originally bid. So that's part of the answer. It's not all of the answer, but it's part of it. There's labor challenges, there's inflation in construction materials that's very, very different than what they bid. It might be a question for Acciona. You know, they had a low bid and then renegotiated and couldn't build it for that amount. And so that's part of the problem too, is we're measuring to something that they didn't deliver on. So it's a bit of a false measurement because they didn't deliver. They didn't say they couldn't deliver on that price. So we're measuring to a price that they proposed or submitted, but never actually could deliver on.
Right, and I realize neither of you were there at the time and in any way part of the debate, the discussions. But to those individuals who were employed at Metro, don't you think that they would have given their head a scratch and said, how on earth can this company deliver $146 million lower than its nearest competitor? I mean, common sense would just have made these individuals think. And so what it does is it goes to how much confidence can people have in the upper management at Metro if such an extreme failure occurred 4 years ago.
No, more
But it was
than
much
4
more than
years
that.
ago.
It
Well, more
was-
than 4.
The mistake was made.
Oh, I'm 4. That's 2020. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting what year. 2014.
Yeah,
So 10
yes.
years ago. That's not a
Yeah.
long time.
And I think actually in
Yeah.
answering that, Jerry, I think it's worth just laying out the steps you've taken to ensure this kind of mistake can't happen again.
Yeah.
I think it's very good to highlight that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for the last executive, but what I can say, and because, you know, this is what I've been told, was they believed that Acciona would deliver what Acciona said they would deliver. So, you know, I can't really say much more than that, but they felt that Acciona would fulfill the commitment that they made. And so I understand your concerns. So changes that we've made at Metro since I came in 2019, the construction industry is very, very complex and becoming more and more complex. The projects that we need to deliver over the next 50 years are huge mega projects in infrastructure. And so we need to have a really, really sophisticated, high-level delivery team. So we've created a new department, a new project delivery department. Jody's one of those professionals. Cheryl Nelms is the general manager. And so that team specializes entirely on construction markets and contracting and delivering projects. We've also brought in an expert panel as an advisory panel. So we have a whole series of different professionals with 30, 40, and 50 years experience in delivering infrastructure mega projects from around the world. Sometimes we get compared to, and I know it's very disappointing, about the same time that we were coming forward with the North Shore plant, the Capital Regional District was building their plant in Victoria. And so sometimes there's for about the same bid price, difference being that their contractor completed that project and left. But the project director of that project works for us now as part of our expert panel and delivery team. So we've been pulling people from Infrastructure BC and P3 Canada and all over to come and advise us.
Okay, so since you said that everything is based on a cost delivery model from the cost allocation model from the 1990s, does it not behoove Metro now to begin to work assertively to equalize the situation? Because not that long from now, when this plant is completed in 2030, you'll be looking at the decommissioning of the Lionsgate wastewater treatment plant. And so that's going to cost a significant amount. And my understanding is the First Nations want that land brought back to the state of perfection. So that's going to cost as well. So we're still in 2030 looking at a model, cost allocation model based on the 1990s. Then what I'm thinking is the North Shore is yet again going to be taken to the cleaners, pardon the pun, but we are, unless this model is changed, because it's to no advantage to the rest of the Lower Mainland to step up and say, hey, we'll pay more. That's just not how nature works. So it's not equal, not fair, and it needs to be addressed before we're going to be hit again.
Yeah, no, excellent question. So one thing I'll just be clear on in terms of decommissioning the existing Lionsgate site, we have not done the work yet with Squamish Nation to determine what that decommissioning would look like. So that's not determined yet, whether what type of land use they want to pursue with that. So that's work that still has to be done. You know, history repeats itself, and sometimes the good and sometimes the bad. So when I referred to the 1990s, you know, that was the time when secondary treatment was being built for the 2 plants on the river. And so that was again, a major funding crisis. How on earth is the region and the sewer areas going to pay for the massive costs of upgrading those plants to secondary? And so that the reason that the existing model was created was it was to deal with a crisis, a funding crisis in the 1990s that was caused by 2 plants going to secondary treatment. And it took about 3 years of hard negotiations through the region. And that's where the 70-30 was agreed to. They talked about 100% shared like we do with water. That didn't fly then, but the 70-30 was the compromise that was agreed to. And now you're hearing and have been hearing concerns from some parts of the region around the taking added costs for the North Shore. Back in the 90s, you heard concerns from the North Shore and Vancouver about taking added costs from those 2 areas. So it's the same concerns, it's the same arguments. It's just the rules have changed, but it is still an important issue. We have in our strategic plan for us to investigate ways of transitioning back to transitioning into a single area, but at this moment, the board has not said that we want to do that. There's been lots of discussion, but we haven't received direction to speed that up. But it's not lost on us. It's in our strategic plan. It's perhaps something that you transition over a long period of time. I don't know, but we got part of the way there in the 90s when we had a funding crisis, and in the 2020s when we have another funding crisis, the board took another $10 step, but didn't go further. And
so could the 3 occupants of the North Shore, could they unilaterally elect to step out of your current funding model? So in other words, rather than us sending the water to you, i.e. the rest of the Lower Mainland, equally, they take a step back and pay far less, since the vast majority of the water that lands on the Lower Mainland lands over here. So they may come to the thinking, if you're not going to play ball with us, you meaning Metro, the Lower Mainland, why should we play ball with you?
yeah, no, that point has been made at the board
Many times.
that your residents could walk over to the lake with a bucket and get their water, and they don't need much infrastructure. Whereas for us to get water from the North Shore, through the rest of the region. I mentioned one tunnel, but there's many tunnels to go under Burrard Inlet, on the north arm of the Fraser and the south arm of the Fraser. Pump stations, reservoirs, there's a huge amount of infrastructure. And yes, everybody pays the same for water. So that is part of the debate that's taking place. The short answer to your question is no, you can't just leave. It would require legislative change to try to do that, but that argument is not lost on people.
I think it's just nice to highlight that this debate is going to continue. There are those of us around the table who are not going to give up on fixing this problem. And I'm really happy to say that we do have support from communities who are would be adversely affected. And I take real pride in the fact that Mayor Rulli from Maple Ridge firmly supported fixing this problem. I think we had 57 votes against, what was it, 80 something votes.
Yeah.
We just need to continue to talk to our colleagues. I know at the time the city of Langley voted against, and I think they would maybe change their mind now. And really what we need to do is persuade people throughout Metro Vancouver that we need to fix this problem.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, there's probably no good time to have that conversation. It's never going to be an easy decision, but it's especially hard now for, I think, two reasons. One is we know from polling that affordability is the number one or number two issue on people's minds and household minds. Now with tariffs, I guess that's also feeding into affordability, but affordability is a huge concern for people. And so I think that's reflecting in our boardroom a real tension around costs. But our model is based on collaboration and working together collaboratively as 23 agencies, 21 cities, electoral area, and a Treaty First Nation to share costs and as a group provide key services, critical services at a lower cost because of the economy of scale. So the other piece that's kind of out there, and the board has made a decision, is Iona. And so the Iona wastewater treatment plant also needs to be upgraded. Our original plan was to build a new plant next to the old plant and then switch the valve over. And the cost of that is estimated at about $9.9 billion. And so the board gave us clear direction earlier that with the affordability concerns and the costs that we're seeing right now in the market, that's just not going to work. The costs are going to be too high for the region. So they've given us direction to go back and see how we can upgrade Iona in a different model, using a different model, a different way, spread it out over a longer period of time so that you're able to keep the cost in a more affordable range within your financial plan, but do it over a longer period of time. So the chair has written to the Prime Minister to ask for an extension, and we're currently now doing that engineering work to say, okay, if we weren't going to just build a brand new plant from scratch, it's going to be 9.9 billion. If we're going to try to preserve, recondition, keep this, replace this component, and then add the secondary treatment as it's needed, add tertiary component as it's needed, how would we do that? So we're expecting to report back, at least preliminarily, in July of this year. And I think once we can show that we can deliver it in a different way, and while it will spread the cost out over a longer period of time, it'll be able to keep the funding requirement to a much lower level. That might take away some of the fear and concern about a discussion about a single sewage area. I think people are rightly concerned about, well, what am I signing up for if we're going to change the funding model? So that report should come back in July of this year. And that I think will help maybe with some of those discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Councillor Watt.
Yeah, I'll just be quick because I know we have some members of the public that want to speak, but I went to that meeting as an observer when they cast the vote, and it was such a David and Goliath situation. It was like a reverse auction, $30, $20, 15, 10. But anyway, going back to some of the comments that you exchanged with Councillor Gambioli, I respect your position that the issue is with that Acciona and not Metro. But again, we 3 small municipalities on the North Shore, we still didn't choose Acciona. And I think it's very important, that is understood. We're a very small player, unfortunately, at the table, suffering a very large consequence here. But with the current crisis with the US right now, do we think this will further impact the budget and potentially chew up any contingencies that may exist? Are we exceptionally vulnerable, or where are we sitting with that?
Jerry, any thoughts on that?
Yes, it's, I was going to be cute and say, well, you tell me exactly what President Trump will do tomorrow, and I'll tell you exactly what the cost of that action is. But yes, there tariffs will impact costs. 97% of our spend, over $1 billion spend a year, 97% of our spend is with Canadian companies. So that's great. They're all companies that are located in Canada. They've got Canadian employees. They have a presence and they do business here. And probably most of them get materials from many other places, including the States. So even though we're doing business with a Canadian company, there might still be impacts from the tariffs. We've done some estimating. At this point, I'm still confident that we can deliver the project within the budget that is set, but that is taking me to the limit of my comfort level because of the uncertainty we're seeing with the market right now. You just went over 100% on tariffs with China. So I don't know the steel that you saw in the photo that Jody showed that's being erected. So now you're starting to see a real building come up. That's all manufactured in Quebec. So that was Jerry, one more. Where's the steel coming from? Quebec.
Okay. Thank you.
But there's lots of machinery and equipment that's coming from different places.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I do recognize 3 members of the public. Jerry, given this, that the 3 of you have come all this evening, I am sorry we don't have a full house to see you, but we do have some wonderful citizens here. Gentlemen, any questions that you would like to pose at this time for any of the members of Metro staff?
Jody, maybe do you want to come over here?
And this good gentleman, his name is Michael Evison, and he is a former member of our council and is also volunteering on our finance and revenue committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question apropos to
Jody.
drinking water. Why are all municipalities not required to have metered water?
Oh, I love that question.
We complain that we have problems every summer. West Vancouver, I think it was about 20 years ago, metered our water supply. In the first year, there was a reduction of 26%. And in my view, that requirement should be applied to all municipalities in Metro Vancouver.
Excellent question. West Vancouver is a poster child for setting the example. Metro Vancouver does prefer that metering is done. We have produced a best practices guide, an easy how-to for member municipalities that they can use to shift towards metering. The board has not required it, but we do encourage it, which isn't your question. Your question is, why don't you require it? And that would be a board decision. I guess what I would say is, while we're a collaborative group, a lot of times we're not dictating to the members what they must do. We try to respond to requests from the board, from the members. So there's a bit of a balance there, but
you're supplying the water.
we supply the water.
And why can't you say, we won't supply the water unless you meter?
So that would, my bosses are the 41 directors that are essentially the 21 mayors and 20 councillors, First Nation chief. So our 41 directors that would make that decision that says you shall do this come from the member municipalities. And as of this point, a majority of that group don't feel it should be mandated, but many of them are doing it. Many of them advocate at meetings regularly for others to do it. And the data shows that the use goes down. The use is tied very much to pricing though as well. Like part of it is knowing how much you use, but then also the pricing, the pay as you use it then triggers a lot of the behavior. I wrote my thesis on it back in the 1990s and was strongly supportive of it personally back then. But it's a board, it would be a board directive that would require it. Peter?
May I add one more
Yes,
piece to
please.
it? Just,
Peter?
there might be a little help on the way. And
Oh,
it-
yeah,
it- Coming
Peter's-
from an
yeah.
unusual source. And so we're drafting our liquid waste management plan right now. We've been going to councils around that. And the principles we're applying in the liquid waste management plan is around conservation. Let's lower our dry weather flow, which water meters can help with, our wet weather flow, and our loadings. So so we are putting pro water metering into a sewer plan. And that's starting to help, I think, tip the narrative in a couple of municipalities. And if you start to see some of those big ones, Vancouver has a notice of motion out there. Staff are working, bringing back content. If you start to see Vancouver, Burnaby, Coquitlam go, everybody's gonna go. And the argument we put on water metering in you build your sewer system, your treatment plants based on what your base flow is. Lower the base flow, cheaper costs. And so with this North Shore plant and all of people are listening. Hey, we can build smaller sewer systems and smaller water systems, double win. And so water metering isn't as scary of a concept as it was maybe a year or two ago.
Thank you.
Michael, I appreciate the question, and I think I'm going to take that up again, because I sit as the vice chair of Metro Water, a position I enjoy. I feel as you do, that we need to be far more conservative with our water usage. Just speaking personally, I actually installed a flow meter that I can read on my phone and track my own usage every day, and you can set your limits. And it's amazing when you do that, how you really start thinking about how much you're consuming and how you can save. You can set your own parameters. The only thing I forgot is if you have somebody staying from out of town and you don't tell them, you have the thing shut off automatically if the water runs for more than 2 minutes. It can cause a problem if someone's having a shower and they don't know I have a limit how much water you can use. Thanks for
remember the
reminding us.
26% reduction in 1 year.
Yeah, for me personally, it's way higher than that in my own consumption, just being
Thank
able to
you.
watch it. Thank you. Gentlemen, either of you, and if not, well, Joe, sorry. Oh, way less than that. No, no, and I hope each one of you, when you're brushing your teeth, turn the faucet off while you're brushing And in the same in the shower, because if you're sailing across an ocean, you turn the water on, you put your shampoos or whatever in, and then you turn it off while you're doing that and turn it on again. You can save a lot of water.
Remember to stay away
I don't even get warmed up in 2 minutes, but I call that job security. So,
I would like to thank Jody. Thank you very much, Peter. Jerry, we're very grateful for your willingness to come and meet with us. This is live streamed, so I hope there are other people, and it also probably gets replayed. So other people in the community who aren't able to be here tonight might be watching us or might watch it in the future. But we are very, very grateful for your efforts, for all of us in Metro Vancouver, and your willingness to share your time with us.
thank you. No, our pleasure, and invite us back. We're happy to come, and there's lots of issues we're all facing, and we're happy to come on any topic. Thank you.
Very grateful. And with that, could I have a motion to adjourn, please? Moved, seconded, all in favor, contrary carried. Thanks, everyone. Gentlemen, thanks for joining us this evening.